I think it's time we blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
All through the night, searching for the one to make me right, wondering if she's the shade of you, and if so, should I try to see it through? I got my trust issues, warning you stay away. If we meet at the rendezvous, take me away, sun ray. Warning you stay away. If we meet at the rendezvous, take me away, sun ray. Yeah. Time mentors may fill my heart with joy. I'll know peace when I'm your lover boy. I'll be your new school soul, silver and gold, new desire, friends on fire. Darling, I got my trust issues, warning you stay away. If we meet at the rendezvous, take me away, sun ray. Darling, I got my trust issues, warning you stay away. If we meet at the rendezvous, take me away, sun ray. That's Lover Boy by Fum Vipurit. I'm probably butchering his name, but it's a Thai artist. Doesn't it feel like this could be real life if we have something to prove? Life would be normal, dinner formal. I could be happy with you. Primitive passion, human reactions, putting it all on the line. This could be real life, what do I feel like? We would be wasting our time. See, it's the same thing, no, same rhythm, new blues, same love, but this time it really ain't love. No reason, no rhyme, no speaking our mind, no war, this isn't what we came for. I never wondered what this could be. I just fuck you and leave. You never wanted nothing from me. I just fuck you and leave. We don't ever come to agree. I just fuck you and leave, yeah. There ain't really nothing to see. That's why I love you. Good in your picture, us giving into love, breaking down all of my walls. You will be faithful, honest and grateful, probably answer whenever I call. I couldn't handle being disloyal, intentionally break us apart. Nor could I measure the level of pressure I'll be under protecting your heart. See, it's the same thing, new, same rhythm, new blues, same love, but this time it really ain't love. No reason, no rhyme, no speaking our mind, no war, that isn't what we came for. I never wondered what this could be. I just fuck you and leave. You never wanted nothing from me. I sit on it and leave. We don't ever come to agree. I just fuck you and leave. There ain't really nothing to see. That's why I love you. We would be more if I could just deal with the pain. I can't survive another tumble down lover's lane. Brightest coloring, ocean of gray ain't the same if I can't. Ain't the same if you stay. What we were doing wouldn't make it okay. Could it be better when we're making a way? I don't want your heart if you can take it away. Is it better or fair when there's nothing to say? I never wondered what this could be. I just fuck you and leave. That was Sir's, That's What I Call Love. I think that's what the name is. I closed the tab, but Sir is incredible, man. Alright, we have some very different songs to choose from here. This is the last song, though. Don't you notice how I get quiet when there's no one else around? Me and you in awkward silence. Don't you dare look at me that way. I don't need reminders of how you don't feel the same. All the burning pain, listening to you up on about some new soulmate. She's so perfect, blah blah blah. Oh, how I wish you'd wake up one day. Run to me, confess your love. At least just let me say that when I talk to you, oh, Cupid walks right through and shoots an arrow through my heart. And I sound like a loon, but don't you feel it too? Confess I've loved you from the start. Da 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 da. Da 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 ba da 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 da. What's a girl to do, lying on my bed staring into the blue? Unrequited, terrifying love is driving me a bit insane. I have to get this off my chest. I'm telling you today that when I walk with you, oh, Cupid shoots an arrow right through my heart. And I sound like a loon, but don't you feel it too? Confess I've loved you from the start. Confess I've loved you, just thinking of you. I know I've loved you from the start. Oh, Cupid shoots an arrow through my heart, and so on. Hello and welcome everybody to the 6 Pixels Under podcast. I am NS or Nerd Slayer or Justin, your host. Yeah, so my brightness is a little bit overturned here. Let me turn that down. Much better. But yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about WoW's Age of Discovery, which feels like pretty much the first of its kind, which is pretty interesting. And then also I wanted to talk about just a bit of a rant. So there was some recent talk about, when I stand up straight, I'm out of frame, my bad. There was some recent talk about Terraceland. And there was a closed beta, and some people were calling it, before it ever even came out or was playable, you know, a WoW clone, a Chinese WoW clone. Now, the thing about the game lately that's created discussion has been that people are being very negative about the fact that it just very much feels like a WoW clone, and that's pretty much it. And something that I wanted to point out is I was reading through the comments and kind of seeing people's perceptions of such, and I got this like overwhelming like realization, because it's something I know and I'm aware of, but it's something that I'm constantly reminded of, which was that I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? In the MMO and MMORPG, especially these days, like both of them,
industries and genres, if you will, the gameplay just sucks. Like, it just sucks, and we excuse it. And like, it's time to start being honest about that. Running from point to point with no actual meaning or meaningful journey along that journey is not actually good gameplay. That, like, no one wrote the book on gameplay and was like, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna stop there. It's like, no, that was never the bar. That was never what we consider to be impressive. Like, fetch quests or anything like a fetch quest, even if it has a cinematic or two, that's never been the bar. But you might be asking or wondering, okay, but then wait a minute. But hasn't it kind of been the bar? And here's where the conversation gets interesting. It kind of has in the online context. Gameplay has lagged behind more than basically anything else in online gaming, especially online RPGs. And it's gotten to the point where it's like, there's nothing wrong with it, enjoying classic games and classic game styles. For example, like RuneScape style. The point that I'm making is more that you're disappointed to learn that Guild Wars 2 LE pistol will be Condi weapon? Huh, interesting. I don't know if that's what I would intuit, but I don't know if that really matters. Also, I forgot to say hello to everybody. My bad, Magister, Des, Late Night Gaming, Boss, Kaina, Spiked, Kirby, Pudmuddle. Anyway, back to my gameplay rant. Let me put this lesson in my mouth. So, we've got kind of just like used to it, We've got used to like the same quests, the dailies, the kind of the same boring experiences, if you will. And something that I think that has become apparent because of how prevalent this is in the industry, people misinterpret that as being kind of like the industry standard. And that's just like this sad realization that a lot of people are very naive and they believe that progression is actually linear and innovation is linear. I know Christmas is coming, guys, and I hate to be the guy to kill Santa, but innovation actually ain't linear. It's not. Nothing states that it is. And what that means is that it doesn't mean that like the games that progressively come out will somehow have better design or better gameplay just because. They just won't. So, yeah, that's just kind of the reality of things. And so you might be asking, okay, but then how do you actually like get better and get better as an industry? It actually takes like 1 or 2 games to really create a ripple effect. But the problem is, in this context that we're talking about of gameplay, a lot of the games that come out are already at odds with kind of being in the space in the first place. What I'm trying to say is like games like, what's that? Spellborn Chronicles was like this Unreal Engine action RPG way ahead of its time. Online RPG way ahead of its time. That being said, it being ahead of its time was also a problem because suddenly now people feel like, well, there's nothing like this. And this is not identifiable. So in a sense, like, making tab target games was easy for a number of reasons. It's easy because it was identifiable. It was easy because you don't have to worry about nearly as much, physics, momentum, and other kind of pesky, engine mechanics like that. Or even aiming. But something constantly misinterpreted about tab target combat, and this is kind of like the point that I'm driving home with why it's not linear progression that we're looking at here, is tab target combat as it stands right now. You can go play classic MMOs, and the combat in those games, tab target combat wise, is better than any of the other games you can play like currently. And I'm one of those people that like really believes that everyone should have self-expression and love and enjoy their own kinds of games, even if they're controversial opinions. For example, at the time this was more controversial, but I love Majora's Mask, right? I don't care if other people hate on it because of the limitations of the game. You see what I'm saying? because it's a quality game. But something that people get a little bit too, like, I think almost like caught in their own fortress about, is thinking that like perception past a point is the same as like making a claim, for example. So when we say that gameplay as a whole in the MMO and MMORPG industry is not very good, I'm making that claim based on the fact that we can look at other industries and we have nothing that they have, right? Meaning that you can't actually look at anything that they have and be like, wow, or we have that, they don't have that. You're like, wow, they should really learn from us. It's like, ooh. Let's go down the list. Do MMOs have faster paced, more smooth, more precise, and more competitive gameplay than shooters do? No. Okay, next genre. Are they more strategic and require more planning than a long-form X3, X4 game, strategy game? No. I play all of them, they don't. Do they require more mass micro, so both decision making than an RTS does? Not even fucking close. No. The amount of actions is not even comparable in comparison. So we start to go down the list and like you start to think about it and you're like, wow, what industry are we beating at gameplay? None of them. We're not beating any of them. And so the better question now becomes, okay, well, why? Because we got lazy in making games that were based in tab target without actually understanding why tab target was so impactful and so effective in the first place. For starters, tab target existed for technical limitation reasons initially. But I don't want to just overplay that hand because it sounds very cheesy and it's hard to argue from that perspective or argue towards it. More so the perspective that I'm trying to make, and I'm not even trying to make like, oh, WoW versus new WoW, because that's a very easy one to make. But just look at classic MMOs. The amount of abilities that you have access to is astronomically not even close to the current industry. You get way more abilities in the older MMOs. Why is that? Is that just because they're dumb, they're bloated, they're all bad? No, I'll actually explain what the idea behind tab target was initially. It's strategic combat. That's actually the point of it. It's supposed to simulate turn-based combat by having things like GCDs and cooldowns. So it actually is supposed to simulate round-based combat. That's the idea of it. If you look at games like KOTOR, for example, actually not that different than what an MMO is doing, right? Think about that for a second. The difference is that you're choosing when to use your inputs on an MMO. So it feels more like you're the one that's doing that stuff in a more like kind of snappy way than KOTOR was, right? But the core of the games are basically the same. They're round-based, right? So you have to think about it in that context. When you start to compare it, for example, MMOs to like Baldur's Gate or Divinity in terms of that context, the round-based, is it as strategic? Is it as involved? It isn't. And here's the sad thing, MMOs should and have the potential to be able to be to that extent. They're just not being built and designed in that way. Tab target combat has now essentially become a bit of like an umbrella thing where you can just kind of stick in everything that's like slightly appealing in it without like ruffling any feathers. What I'm trying to say is that because tab target doesn't have to worry about aiming, in my opinion, what it should be focusing on is pushing boundaries. Because otherwise it's just the same shit, right? Everyone's going to be used to Terrace Lane having the same tab target combat. It would have been better had it actually done what Warhammer did versus WoW, which Warhammer made CC more of a focal point. That changed how the combat works in both of these games. Now the engine in Warhammer is also worse, to be fair, but you get what I'm saying. Like, they're very similar games, but Warhammer chose a different approach in how it was focusing on combat. And it kind of makes the PvP a bit more enjoyable. So tab target games can focus on different things like that. Tempo, speed of things, but something they can't compromise, in my opinion, otherwise you're just playing essentially an inferior style of play, is they can't compromise on strategy. When they start to give you less options for abilities, that's one way to compromise. That's not the only way, it's one way. Another way is less choice in actually customizing your character. right? It's the number one thing I hate about Final Fantasy XIV. I cannot stand the class job system. I have never liked it since it existed. The first time I encountered it like 20 years ago. Like, anytime I ever have encountered that system, never liked it. Now, do I understand the success of it? Yeah, honestly, very easily. Because I think I'm actually in the minority on that. But that being said, there are some strengths and weaknesses to any kind of system, right? And the cool thing with a system like that is that you can basically play whatever you want. Eventually, right? The problem with other games is oftentimes people feel like because they're going to have to repeat the same kind of grind, it's not really worth it to make a new character. And part of what I'm trying to drive home here at is that, like, when tab target systems are really good combat-wise, people are incentivized to make new characters because they want to experience new ways to experience that style of strategy or combat. And so what MMO developers and MMORPG developers are lacking in this combat style at the moment, in tab target to be specific, is they're lacking the ability to give you tools, right? First off, they're giving everyone Swiss Army knives, which work on everything. That's going to kill strategy, right? You can't do that. The other thing is that they're not giving you enough tools to actually counter other things. It's something that's cheesy about Pokemon, but Pokemon does that really well. You know what's going to counter what, and you know how to play against certain things, right? And that needs to be how MMOs are played as well. It's something that's really awesome about Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, is these games are very, like, dissectable in terms of what works, what doesn't, and what works against certain types of builds. Now, mind you, in Guild Wars 2, mechanics is also a major problem and factor. But my point being is that knowing how to play the class identities and counter them is a big part of these games. That's how MMOs should be played, and MMORPGs should be played. They should be about, like, looking at a class identity and knowing how to play against that certain kind of class, or what type of tools that they provide to the table. What would I do instead of a class job system? You mean, like, personally? Because, like, one thing that people don't understand quite well, and I'm not saying this is you, but to be clear about how I view this kind of stuff, like, I've done a lot of consultant work, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I will continue to do even if I have my own MMO. And it's because I always really enjoy giving different perspectives and basically role-playing, putting on a different hat, and putting myself into a different perspective. So I make this long-winded answer to say that, like, I'm not always about me, meaning that if I'm doing consultant work, or a client comes to me, or even just someone who watches my video comes to me with an idea, like, that they want to hear some feedback on, like, I'm gonna provide that perspective of, okay, what are you trying to create? What are you trying to make? What's your scale? What's your scope? What's your desire, right? When I hear all of that, then I'm gonna have answers to this question. But to be very specific to myself and saying what I personally enjoy or personally prefer, I think that combat professions should not be the same as a crafting profession, but not in the lazy way of just making it like, I'm a tanner. But, like, if you think about the concept of actually being a tanner, it's an entire ecosystem. And that's, to me, what's lacking is like, gathering professions oftentimes are kind of treated as auxiliary, but not further developed. And the issue with that is that, like, they're integral. Anything that's integral to the game and the way that the world functions should actually have serious effort put into making those good gameplay feedback loops, and also just making them impactful, because they just should be, right? Like, somebody getting resources should be impactful. So what I'm trying to say here is that I believe your job or your profession should give you skills based on whatever job or profession it is. So, for example, if you're a bounty hunter, if you're a town guard, whatever profession you can think of that's combat related, you're probably going to have some combat related skills. But a majority of professions aren't. Like, as much as, for example, Lord of the Rings likes to call their new class a mariner. A mariner isn't a combat class. It's just a person that works the dock. So, for example, if you had a mariner profession, that'd be a way that you would make a living. And since I want to build a game that allows you to have professions and ways to make livings to connect to the world and also just have ways to make money without having to just grind monsters. I cannot stand that as a concept. And the problem there is that Deku Mud was a very famous mud that basically inspired all of the original MMORPGs, and so they're pretty much all based on the same style of gameplay, which is very vertical progression and very kill X, farm X thing. If you actually look this up in various materials on the original writers and creators of the mud industry was actually incredibly diverse. It wasn't just kill X, power up Diablo style, MMOs and online virtual worlds. There was a bunch of other kinds. There were social kinds, there was some kinds where it was like you actually walked around as one big party. Like, there was a lot of different approaches. But because Deku Mud, aka RuneScape, aka WoW, aka EverQuest, aka the list goes on, what games they affected and influenced, that style became so prevalent, it's now become this identity where combatants are always expected to be present or willing to be combatants. And this is why casual games right now are so fucking popular. It's something that's funny to me that people don't quite understand, is like, they misinterpret thinking that, they say this constantly, oh, people wouldn't play hardcore games anymore. That's never gonna be true, guys. It's only gonna get worse. As technology advances, you don't think games are gonna get better at being hardcore? Like, it's just, that's a linear line. And that's a linear line of progression. It's just not a fast one, right? It might not be like, it might be, but it's gonna keep going in that direction, because as virtual reality starts to become a real thing, suddenly the world is a lot easier to mimic, right? And so when you start to think about that kind of stuff, you think about like, well, if you want to play, exactly, people still have to pay their bills. So the problem in a lot of these games is that because fighting is the only way to pay your bills, everybody fights. And that's problematic, because the truth is not everybody's a combatant, nor wants to be. And I think that that's why, I always bang the drum, quote unquote, for sandbox MMOs. And while it might seem to some, it might seem to some that I'm like a hater of MMORPGs, it's not that I'm a hater. They're in the limelight right now. MMORPGs don't need don't need a voice right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, MMORPGs need a voice. They need somebody saying the stuff that I'm saying, so people understand that, like, we need both of these style of games to exist. They're both very useful. They're both awesome in their own rights. But on the line of what I'm saying right here, if you end up playing games that only ever make you fight, and the combat system's too intense, here's the weird part about it. It burns you out. And it's because you don't want to be stuck in an actual war zone all day. Nobody does, dude. Right? Not even combatants want to do that. So you see what I'm saying? So then you start thinking about it. Well, there's tons of skill-only crafting and non-combat MMOs, but they're not the ones that most people here are interested in. Like, I just covered one, in fact, Club Penguin, but it's not one that, like, the hardcore gamer was attracted to. But that's because there wasn't any hardcore gaming loops in it. And that's the point that I'm making here, is that you can actually do both if you wanted to. Don't just think about it as being one or the other. The social MMO versus the combat MMO. It's like, no, you can do both. If anything, the world is much better when you can do both. But that's the problem in many of these combat systems, why they become so casual and easy. It's not because they're trying to attract to as many players as you might think. It's actually because they're trying to attract to as many players while under the guise of still making it combatant only. Does that make sense? It means that it's almost like a false acceptance, where it's like you have players that are playing this style of game that aren't actually interested in the style of game, but they found a way to get into the game. And to be clear, that's not gatekeeping. It's like, that's just normal. Sometimes people get interested into games on accident and actually end up becoming big fans. The point that I'm making here, though, is that, like, when we're talking about only fighting all the time, you're going to be attracted to games that are casual inherently, because most people don't want to fight all the time. So if you actually have a game that's hardcore or has hardcore elements to it, but actually allows for people to play that aren't just combatants, well, suddenly now you have this game that can appeal to more than one kind of player. And even more specifically, you have a community that supports itself. Because as much as, like, people like to think that like, oh, in these kinds of games, PvPers just end up killing everybody. Well, think about it for a second. Do PvPers also farm? Most of them don't. I'm telling you from personal experience, which means they need friends, which means they need crafters, which means they need people that don't fight all the time. Do you see the point that I'm making is that no matter what you slice it back or bring it back, it always goes back to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is if all people must fight, then people will die and they will not be happy. And that's just the reality of how combat and conflict works. It's why it's so horrible whenever we see civilians get killed. It's because we're like, we don't want that to happen. They're not even involved, quote unquote, in the war, but they are. Maybe kind of like without directly being involved, you know what I'm saying? And so that's what I think about with MMO players, especially some that have like horrible PvP stories, as many of them are like, they feel like that's their experience, you know? And I can actually, as corny as it might sound, I can actually see where they're coming from, a certain perspective. Yeah, so KDN, that's a good example. EverQuest was a good game that had that balance because there was a lot of downtime and a lot of need to group together. Now, Brad has admitted historically, you know, rest in peace, that he probably had too much downtime, but that's a good idea of it. Do you think that that's why GTA? Yes, exactly, MMORPG gal. You always have like insightful shit to say, but like that's a great point. The people always ask me, why does GTA do so well? Why does GTA RP so big? And it's like, honestly, it's big because it appeals to everybody. It does. Everyone has that crazy streak where they just want to run shit over and shoot at shit. That's what video games are for, right? And so suddenly you have all kinds of players, casual, hardcore, looters, you know, achievement hunters, PvPers, PvEers, pay-to-winners. All of them had a place to go and had different content that supported them. You could just be social and hang out with your dudes. You could just run around and shoot at enemy gangs and shit. Those kinds of games offer a lot to do besides just fighting, and that's something that's been missing in so many of these games. It's why I get so critical about the gameplay. It's like, if you're gonna make the whole part of the game fighting, put way more effort into the fighting, please. Because it just becomes boring for me, especially if you've played so many of these games like I have. It's the same combat system we've played already, you know? So I'm just like, okay, well, you know. And mind you, you can innovate, you can do it differently. But there's also another solution. Without having to make the combat necessarily better, you can just make the rest of the game better. Which means that combat just becomes kind of something that you do whenever you have to. And I think that that has been lacking in so many games for a good amount of time. I appreciate the 5 USD MMORPG gal. I hope all is great for you, Nerd Slayer, always in all of your passion and knowledge. I appreciate that. And actually, you activated one of my other rants I was saving for the stream too, so that'll be worth 5 USD, I hope. Goggle Po, or Goggle Po? Goggle or Goggle? Did you ever play Vanguard? Yes, so actually Vanguard, as people here are probably aware of, was created by Brad. Well, Brad came up with this idea. What if we don't just make downtime something that happens, but actually make it a kind of way to play the game? And obviously that's a very simple concept, but that's what I thought was so cool about the game, is that you could level from not just fighting. And there was even diplomacy in the game too, which is basically like a card game. So all of these things existing, to me, are examples of learning from his previous game. And trying to come up with gameplay mechanics to support social activities. That's what Club Penguin does so well. If you want to ask me, in a nutshell, what does Club Penguin do so well? Social activities that are fun, not that competitive. Honestly, it's that simple. The games aren't even that complicated, nor well in depth, nor have crazy gameplay to them, right? But it's a combination of customizing your avatar, with playing these social games with your friends, with getting these unlocks, with socializing in general, right? That makes the game much better than it actually is. Yeah, and Great Defender, my read on that, for why social tracks aren't as fleshed out oftentimes, is because it's hard to explain social things, and also, I'm just going to be very blunt, the majority of developers that I've met, they're not very social. And if you're not very social and you don't understand social shit, then, I mean, what the fuck are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna do what most people do, which is just be like, okay, here's our friends list, here's a guild, and there you go. And it's like, well, if you think about Club Penguin, if you saw my video, they designed the game to be for kids. So with kids, you're trying to think, how can we make kids be cooperative with each other? Playing games. You see why that was such a central theme? Because games are an easy way to get kids to play nicely with each other. Right? I don't think I've heard you mention it, Ines, but what's your thoughts on Ashes of Creation? My thoughts on Ashes of Creation kind of branch out to other MMOs and online RPGs, so hopefully this is useful to other people listening for that, which is that ideas are really easy to make sound cool, especially if you've been exposed to them and played a lot of these games. That being said, taking an idea and actually bringing it and making it become a world is the most difficult part. It's why so many MMOs fail within their first couple of months. It's because they have an okay game, but probably not a very good world. And if you're trying to make a game like that, most of the time you're going to need a world. Yeah, Mr. Zero Sins, this is very common. In fact, when I've given advice to people before, they're usually pretty surprised by my, like, social advice. And I'm just going to be very blunt. Again, there's just a lack of social skill, and it's getting worse. And, you know, if I'm going to preach for a second, social skill will carry you through life. So, like, work on it, and here's the beauty. You can work on it in these games that I cover, which is the coolest part about them to me. That being said, what you said happens all the time. People will ask me, or even clients I'm working with will be like, oh yeah, and so how do you work on getting people to talk to each other? And it's just like, have you guys ever thought about this in the real world context before? Because if you're like me, and I have a lot, because I'm an ENTJ and I'm a very social person, if you know Myers-Briggs, ENTJ, I'm a very social person, even if I'm not outwardly social, but I do like to socialize a lot. I thought about this all the time. So it's like, it could just be a difference of personality, but it could also be exposure. That I learned how to socialize online, so I know how to create socialization online. See what I'm saying? I know how to create a community. That's one skill I had before I made my YouTube channel that I already knew how to do. And it's something that I hope people still feel that I have to this day, including people who've been watching me now for many years, which is that something that I've always believed in since the very beginning of my channel was that I wanted to be engaged with my audience as much as possible. There's some detriment to that, but there's a lot of positive. For example, a lot of the people that come watch me on stream are a lot more interested to hear me talk and actually have interest in what I have to say. So I can be more personable, right? That's a great point, Poe. Because yeah, that's the thing about Minecraft and Roblox is it cracks me up when people try to say like, yeah, but that's social shit, nobody cares about that anymore. And I'm just like, bro, don't fall for the stupid shit that you hear online. Like, social shit ain't working? You think Roblox ain't social? You ever been to a Minecraft server and got talked to by a little kid? I was raising my hand, but it's out of the frame. I have. That's just a normal Minecraft experience. They play the game to socialize, guys. So, yeah, there's actually like a kind of a divide there in a weird sense, where it's almost like it skipped a generation, then the next generation came out, and the young ones are playing those games to socialize. But suddenly, a lot of these social gamers and socializations are occurring outside of MMOs and online RPGs. And I'm not saying that like we have a fucking like monopoly on them, but it sucks to see that, you know? Like Animal Crossing was cool for me to see, but it was also like, it pained me to see it. Because it was just like, damn, they just made an MMORPG basically that did incredibly, insanely well. Imagine if an MMO had came in and did this. It's like, it slightly hurt me because I was just like, there's so much that was there on the table that other developers for such a long time just left. Yeah, Mr. Zero Sins, that's the case for me. I'm very, very fortunate that I've met very, very, very interesting people online. I've met all of my relationships online. I met a lot of my best friends online. I met my best gaming friends online. I mean, government officials. I met, special forces. I've met, you know, famous people. It's the internet is just so crazy, man. Newer young gamers are far more extroverted online than past gamers born pre-2K. See, I'm gonna slightly disagree, and I think that this. So let's talk about socialization, because it's always like a touchy subject, especially for a gaming YouTuber, right, to talk about. But let's talk about socialization. So in the 90s, we had basically like the rise of the internet, right? It wasn't the true rise, but it was like the early rise. And so chat rooms were very common in the late 2000s, early 2000s. And that was a big way how we socialized. So to be clear, people that were born in the 90s, we were incredibly social online. Almost all of us were. It's a common misconception that I hear from people that came online after the 2000s. They come on later, they think that other people are less social like they are because they're also online. And it's like, actually, and I've talked to Card about this at length, the earliest gamers that I played with online, like I'm talking 99, 2000, 2001, they were all like social. We all got on AIM, for example, like Hellglazer said. AIM, you know, AOL, MSN, Messenger, like we were very social players. And I think it's because the earliest type of gamers and online like participants were super nerds, you know, people that didn't fit into actual society. And I was very young to be a part of that. But that's how I was a part of that, is I was underage, but I was young enough to still kind of feel like I related to a lot of those people. So I found myself playing these social games too, Habba Hotel, you know, Mabinogi, Maple Story, Ragnarok later on, Dark Eden. The point that I'm making is that the early 2000s, or the early 90s gamers, and even mid-90s gamers, we were very social players. Which is why the games that we got in the early 2000s and late 90s fit us perfectly. Now, a point that someone made in chat, which I kind of agree with, is that like it seems like there's a bit of like an age gap where it's like then there's a generation where it's like that's less so, and then suddenly it comes back. And I think that there's some truth to that. I can't sit here and tell you exactly why or what it is, but I definitely think there's some truth to that. But I do want to say that like something that I do start to see people say is that, well, if an MMO came out today that was, you know, social and required socialization, it wouldn't work. And it always just makes me laugh because it's like, humans are still social and we will always be social. That will never change. Which means that like there will always be a need, desire, and place for socialness, gaming, and social experiences, right? So it means that like there will always be a place for social MMOs. The difference is that just being social in these games, unless it's a full transformative experience, like an Avatar VR type situation, like look at the rise of VR chat, you're probably not going to get that far. You see what I'm saying? Because Discord exists and other chat services exist, so straight chat service MMOs and online RPGs probably aren't going to be that good anymore. But I think that it's an oversimplification to think that like, well, they won't exist because people are just like less social, and it's like, no. We're always social. We will always be social. Which means that, what's the problem then? Well, the problem is you're actually hearing it. Just listen to people sometimes. Think about this for a second. Think about this, guys. Why do you keep hearing people say they don't want to play social games? That social this, fuck this social that. I don't want to do social. No, I don't want to talk to. Because guess what they're actually telling you? The problem is that I don't feel like being social. The problem is that I don't see the value in being social. The problem is that it doesn't feel fun to be social. The problem is that it doesn't feel rewarding to be social. The problem is that I get rejected whenever I'm social. It's actually a hurt person that's basically telling you how they feel and what they're going through. So when you actually just take time to listen to people's perspectives on social gaming and online RPGs, a lot of the time they'll just tell you straight up, without kind of even realizing it sometimes, that these issues that they have it's like some like green bug. That was either like the smallest cricket I ever seen in my life. Interesting. Anyway, that threw me off. So you see what I'm saying? So they're actually telling you what the issue is. They're telling you what the problems are. And so this was something that I really want to talk about from my MMORPG versus MMORPG video, or more specifically my soloable MMO video, which was talking about MMOs. Not Final Fantasy XIV, not Guild Wars 2, not, you know, modern WoW, but MMOs. They don't really exist anymore. Hence why people kept thinking that I'm talking about the same thing. But something that people kept saying in that video is dude, you keep acting like people that don't want to be social don't have problems. And it's like, okay, let's like separate something for a second. Something that I've never said and I would never say because it makes no logical sense, and like literally like who would have the brain power to be this dumb? Which is just like, people will bring up the argument, oh, so what you're trying to say is that if you don't want to always socialize, you could never play an online game. It's like, no. And arguing with like really extreme, like silly level, like, you know, hyperbole is not that helpful. Like nobody thinks that, right? Nobody thinks, oh, but then it has to be the exact extreme, or you must socialize or you're kicked out of the game. It's like, okay, that could be possible, but the extreme doesn't need to be just because it exists or could exist. So the point is that people will say, okay, well then, like, when I'm playing an MMORPG, I don't want to talk to anybody. Great. When I'm playing an MMORPG, I don't want to be social. I just want to play the game. Okay. When I'm playing an MMORPG, I want to play solo. Cool. Now let's change the, you know, scenery for a second. When I'm playing an MMO by myself, I don't want to socialize with anyone. All right, good luck getting anything done. When I'm playing an MMORPG, I want to be able to do join all the in-game content without being socially evaluated by people. Ain't gonna happen, buddy. I'm sorry. Well, I want to play an MMORPG where I can kill the Lich King by myself. Ain't gonna happen. This is the part people want to be like either just dumb about or act like I'm being facetious about it, when it's like, that's my argument. My argument is that that doesn't make any logical sense. Which means you can't build your game for that player who wants to solo raid. Like, how many people missed that point in that video? It's like bizarre to me. It's like, dude, the point is you can't design a world for a solo player. Even Yoshi P in fucking Final Fantasy XIV said that this isn't a soloable game. I built it to attract solo players. That's different. That's not the same thing. People think it's the same thing because it sounds similar, but the point that he's making is that he built an environment that attracts players that could be solo players, but it's not just for solo players. That's the point. Right? And so this is something that I think is misinterpreted a lot in these discussions, and it's why a lot of developers, I think, are scared of making games like this, is that they'll get the pushback. That's very real. It exists. Trust me, I mean, hundreds of comments saying the same type of stuff. I don't want to play with other people. I don't want to do da-da-da-da-da. Okay, If you're playing an MMORPG where you can just have henchmen or companions with you most of the time, you probably don't need to. So you're probably misinterpreting my argument. In reality, we're not arguing against each other at all. But if you're still arguing that same thing when you're talking about massive online RPGs, it's just like, bro, like, they can't build the game for just you. It's impossible. And then to get into my further point about sociality, those complaints that you're listening to are people telling you basically what the issue is, which is they can't socialize. That is an issue. The point and the reason why I will always defend these games to the end of my time until I am dead is because online gaming, specifically online RPGs and MMORPGs, both of them, not just one, right? Not just the massive variants, both of them have socialization. Both of those taught me how to socialize. Guild Wars 1, Phantasy Star Online were the first time I ever felt like I met like-minded people. Dark Eden and Habbo Hotel was the first time I ever socialized with adults. Right? These early experiences shape so much of me, you know? And so it matters so much for me to, you know, make sure that that's a key thing that I'm constantly talking about. And so that's why I think that you always hear me talk about it from the perspective of socialization and what does that mean. And I think that an interesting point that somebody made, I really think rants are better suited to a video. I don't, and I don't think they make any logical sense to be in one. So there you go. But anyway, so when you're playing a game that actually facilitates socialization, right, and helps you do these things, you'll start doing it naturally without even realizing that you're doing it, because we're social creatures. We don't always think about when we're socializing. We're not always thinking about saying thank you, or please, or sorry, or whatever else, right? So the point that I'm making is that when it comes to socialization, if your argument is, well, I don't want to socialize, if you're playing a game that doesn't require you to, nobody's gonna care, right? If you're playing a game that requires you to, like, even if we're talking about WoW, Age of Discovery, for example, you're probably going to need to communicate in that game. It starts to become a bit of just a worthless complaint when people complain about it. You see what I'm saying? And that's why you have to be very careful about what criticisms you do listen to. If I only, and developers only ever listen to the players that constantly say, I don't want to socialize, I don't want to socialize, I don't want to socialize, guess what would end up happening? We would all be collectively worse at socialization. And guess who that helps? It actually doesn't help anybody. There's no collective evidence that us collectively being worse socially is somehow better. There's no evidence of that. Because pro-socialization is actually linked scientifically to, guess what? Nonviolence, socialization, so on and so forth. So pro-socialization is very, very, very important in societies, which means that games that exist that allow for people to go to learn socialization should and always will hopefully exist. For that reason, they'll always have a place to exist. And one thing that we used to get before people ever learned about what online shit was is, why do they need to learn it in an MMO? Well, here's an easy fucking answer. How many of you in chat right now feel like everyone they can relate to in their class, in their work, in their school, in their whatever? Probably not very many, right? And even just logically, not very many. I'm not even trying to say everybody here is as weird as I am, but I'm just trying to say that, like, maybe most of you still feel weird, right? Even if you aren't that weird. And so where do weird people have to go if they want to hang out and socialize? There actually isn't a lot of places. Especially in more public places these days. It's becoming less common to see stuff like that. So suddenly being a person of, you know, essentially prejudice or whatever, maybe you just feel weird, right? Maybe you're not actually prejudiced, but you feel like you are. Where would you go? Online gaming. Online gaming is the place that you would go to and have a safe place that you can be whatever identity you want to be and socialize, right? That's it. That's why I believe so much into that stuff. So, if you don't want to be around other players, period, and you definitely don't want to socialize with them, don't play an MMO. People have been trying to make me feel bad about saying that for like 20 years. And that's the thing that's funny, is sometimes I'll get certain arguments in my chat and it's like, I don't think you guys understand that I've been hearing this shit for 20 years. Like, the same arguments you guys are making now, you know, not everyone here in chat, but I'm saying, like, you know, the proverbial you. I've heard it before. Like, I've heard the arguments for why. Oh, well, why do we need to learn to socialize? Because socialization is a good life skill that basically keeps you from being automated by a robot. Like, that should be all you need to hear, really, right? It makes you more money. What else do you want to hear? It gets you friends. It can get you laid. Like, I could keep going. It's like socialization is the thing that really, really helps you as a person. And that's why I believe so much in having places that you can go and learn to be social. Now, to slightly push against my argument for a second, I'm gonna design a single-player game that has the same concept. Dun dun dun. Some of them exist already, so I'm not the only one. But my idea came to me when I thought, I have no resources and basically nobody on my team. How am I gonna make an online social game the way that I wanna make it? I can't. So what I could do is make a single player one and find a way to make that actually give you the same sort of experience, or as close as it can, to where you feel like you're learning socialization. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my single player game, is when people play it, they're going to feel like, hey, I recognize these characters. I have a relationship with them. I know them. I'm aware of them. I'm aware of the culture of the world that I'm participating in. I care about my character and my decisions. Right? Like, I want to try to do as much of that in my single player game as I can. That way, whenever it's time to go into a multiplayer online world format, it'll be a natural transition. You see what I'm saying? And I'm really excited about that, because I think that there's a lot of room to do that right now, because so many players are not understanding these concepts I'm talking about. So I can basically trick them into understanding them when they're playing a single player game, and then prime them for whenever it goes multiplayer, to where it'll just kind of be like a natural fit in a sense, you know? I like to play ESO on console because it's far more social and nice than on PC. It's such a contrast. That's not that surprising to me for some reason. Interesting though. It would be interesting to see how many people complain about socialization than complain about AI. So what you'll find that's very interesting there, Des, that's a very good thread that you've noticed, is that I noticed that early on when AI was becoming a big topic, that I would talk to people who were very scared about AI. Hey man, like da-da-da, automation, like da-da-da, you know, like, okay, like, what's your job? It's like, well, my job's this. It's like, okay, well, like, are you a good salesman? Are you good at, like, selling yourself? It's like, no. It's like, okay. Do you have the ability to, like, learn very quickly and pick up new skills, like, through socialization? It's like, no. It's like, okay. Do you have any, like, rich friends? No? Okay. How the fuck do you think you're gonna get opportunity? Like, the chance of you getting opportunity is very low, because nobody's ever gonna hear about you. No one's ever gonna learn about it from you. No one's ever gonna know that you even have something of value to give anybody. It just, the list goes down the list. Or, it goes down the list? The list goes on. Shit. Curious, what makes console ESO more social than PC? My argument would probably be that console players are more casual. That would be my opinion. See if I missed anything. Ever heard of an MMO called Hellbreath? I don't think so, Bright. Hey, how's it going, Akiritaki? Nikolai? Yes. So KDM, to go back to, I wanted to highlight that. They want to try to be social, but they don't know how to engage in it properly. I think that's actually the majority of people. And the problem with that is that they're telling you the story, right? If we just listen to the part that's the angry part, I don't want to play games like that. If a game required me to have friends, it would fail. If games required cooperation, shit, they would never work. It's like, listen to yourself for a second and think, are you a bitter social person or are you making a good logical argument? It's like, I mean, that's not a logical argument, right? It's like going back to what I would hear about people saying, oh, these kids these days don't want to be social anymore. Meanwhile, I would jump in Roblox servers and people are like, hey, you want to download my game? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? But that's a thing you can do, actually. Do you want to download my game? It's like, what the is this malware? No, he's being serious. I can download his map or some shit in Roblox. And that's a big thing that's missing in MMOs is the chance to play with different age groups. And so it's like we need to get back to teaching people how to socialize. And yeah, if we make a game that's more focused for kids, is there going to be some negatives to that? Yeah, like it's probably going to have chat restrictions, right? But if we have a chat service that maybe we want to just like appeal to everyone, maybe we have some basic chat restrictions, but really just allow for people to talk to each other normally. I do think that Roblox is the Flash of the current generation, including how the audience treats it. I do agree with that, Fikes, that having fast keyboard chat is easier to be toxic. Another thing about that too, in my time playing PSO, like growing up, because people always ask, hey, PSO, how were you social in that game? It's a basically cooperative, right? Well, you could join different ships and also join different rooms. The ingenious part about that game is that it had an auto translation selectal dial system for chatting. And what that means is that it automatically would, for example, if you chose, let's see, hello, how are you doing? A greeting in the game. It would literally turn that greeting into 안녕하세요 in Korean, right? Or, you know, ¿qué pasó in Spanish, or you get what I'm saying. So meaning that the game was actually designed with it in mind that you could play with people from different languages in different places. And because, you know, essentially latency was non-existent of an issue, you could play with a nice catch, Des, but you could play with people from across the world and still like actually just talk to each other. I played with the keyboard as well. I got the keyboard during Phantasy Star Universe, but I got the keyboard where you plug it into the bottom like this, and you can on your controller. And that was like the optimal way to talk in those games. So you could kind of talk like fast if you had that. But like largely people would just be like, okay, hello, with the little like pre-selected chat things. And it was very social game. It was a very social game. We all talked to each other all the time. Lobbies were always social, pop in, like, so like I think that that's a common misconception people might have is thinking about a game like that, like, oh, it wasn't very social. It's like, honestly, for all intents and purposes, as limited as it was incredibly social. I always played it with my friends. Like, I never played it by myself, you know? And you could play the single player by yourself, by the way. Another thing people don't know about MMORPGs, technically it could be played offline, right? Because it's not a world. Da-da-da-da-da. That's the genius part. All on dial-up on a Dreamcast, I know. Those were the days. Yeah, Bird Gaming. I forgot about that, actually. Nice mention. TF2 players. Voice chat COD still today is still something. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be, but it's still something. Yeah, so I think because so many games have lost this concept of having a world where you're not just a combatant, it's made it basically all about fighting in these games. And so what's weird about that is that we're not nearly as critical of gameplay in these games as we probably could be, but it's because the industry at large is kind of not very good at gameplay. And yeah, it's actually like to further my point, something that constantly like surprises me is that there is a lot of gameplay related decisions that players don't quite still understand even 20 years later, 25 years later, 30 years later. Which is, for example, as the speed of combat increases, latency becomes more of an issue. And mechanics become more of a requirement. So it's never as simple as some people might think, which is just make fast-paced combat. It's like, well, you're going to alienate a lot of players, especially non-combatant players, right? Which is why tab target is so effective. It can attract players who aren't normally attracted to combat, because it feels like there's more of like a tactical edge to it. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into this. Like, I'm not trying to oversimplify anything, but I'm just trying to drive home the point that like MMORPG and MMORPG gameplay right now is lacking, but it's lacking because of some kind of very almost like silly reasons, where it's like our public perception isn't very high right now of what we're trying to expect for these games being, right? And so I think that like a good example of that is like people think that like, oh, well, action combat was just gonna take over, and yet it hasn't. Why hasn't action combat taken over? Because the majority of people who play online RPGs aren't action-oriented players. It's just, if you think about it, like the most famous action-oriented games that we've had have never been more famous than tab target games. And it's not to say that like they were better, I'm not trying to make one-to-one comparisons. The point that I'm making is just there's a lot more exposure in this marketplace to non-action oriented online games. So building an action game is actually going against the grain. And that's why you don't see it done that much. It's not just because it's difficult, it's also because there's fears that you'll alienate the audience you're trying to attract in the first place. Yeah, so Bird Gaming, another one is Black Desert Online. Black Desert Online is actually FPS based, it's client based. So if you lag in that game too, you're dead. Dude, Bird, you don't have to say you're black. Like, so one of these days I'm gonna get my cousin to come on stream. I'm losing my voice, so it's a good time to stop stream in a second. But I want to have my cousin come on stream, and I want you guys to actually ask him some of these questions so you can see what he goes through and I go through all the time, which is that because I have a deep voice and I'm from Houston, so I probably don't speak very properly, I get called black and the other word, as you can intuit, probably like every single day. Like, no joke, probably every single day I play games with voice chat, I get called racial slurs. It's the crazy thing is they almost never call me the correct racial slur. Not that that would somehow be better, but it happens to me all the time. So yeah, I don't even need to say I'm black. I can just enter lobby and be like, yo, and people are like, oh wow, he's black. Yeah, see, like anytime I tell people this, they're always so surprised. I love telling people in person, that's because they can look at me and be like, what? But I'm not kidding, this happens to me every single game, nearly every single day that I play a game with a voice chat. Yeah. So, it's not because I'm acting some way, right? Just being myself, and I get called black and racial slurs all the fucking time. So growing up, I was quite aware of that shit, racism already existing. Not that my city is very segregated, so I know about racism. But anyway, you mentioned earlier that. Wait, did I miss anything before that? You mentioned earlier that tab targeting used to be strategic. You're telling me that we did not used to have an emphasis on rotations. So rotations aren't inherently not strategic. I think people have a misconception about rotations because it's using the same buttons. Rotations only really matter in static PvE encounters, because almost all PvE encounters are static. They don't change. They're not organic. There's no learning AI. There's no shifting. The developers don't change mechanics. It's rotations become boring. But rotations in PvP have always been something that I've laughed about, because whenever I have my PvE friends, and I've coached tons of PvE players with no PvP experience. Ask people in chat right here, I've taught players with no PvP experience. And it's like, I'm not bragging about it, I just like it. I don't know what it is, I just like it. It's like almost like I'm teaching them about like combat for the first time in real life, like when I'm training some, you know, it's like I get the same enjoyment from it. I love to teach people for the first, especially when they're good at something else and they're new to something. It's like, it's just so cool. But anyway, I've taught many of my friends for the first time, right, to do and play these types of games. And my PvE friends will come over and be like, I want a PvP, man. Tell me what I need to do. What's the rotation? And I always tell them, bro, if you're thinking about the rotation, you're thinking about it wrong. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, isn't there an optimal DPS per second? It's like, well, technically, could there be? Yeah. Is everyone always going to make the optimal perfect decision when you're having to make decisions against somebody else on split seconds? No. That's kind of the point. Meaning that both of you are always going to be looking to make different moves and different kind of counters to each other's moves. So you see what I'm saying? So rotations now become a lot more fluid. And on top of that, matchups matter a lot more. Suddenly it becomes, well, who am I playing against? What is his tools? What are his strengths? You see what I'm saying? So to put that into more context, or rather to explain it further, rotations can be absolutely strategic, but when they're in static context, right, an environment that is static, which is a raid oftentimes, if not all the time, it's very formulaic, just inherently, right? It's math. But when you suddenly have emergent gameplay thrown in, aka another player doing real life player actions, suddenly the concept of rotation doesn't really make that much sense. We will or should do one at some point. In fact, maybe we should do one to end this year, because I always love talking to those guys. Zachron and Indigo are both super intelligent guys. They're also very opinionated, which I like. Zachron probably more so. Not that Indigo's not opinionated, he's just nicer about being opinionated. I'm not. But we're all very opinionated, all very intelligent and capable. And yeah, I think we have good conversations, so I would like that, yeah. What do you think of the season-based servers WoW is doing? So I was talking briefly about the Age of Discovery stuff, and I'm very interested in it. And I didn't really fully mention why, but I'll tell you guys why. As somebody who's been playing WoW private servers for, I'm not exaggerating, prepare to hear this real, like, number. I've been playing WoW private servers for, you guys ready? Drum roll. 17 years. I've been playing WoW private servers for 17 years. So, needless to say, you know, like, you think about it and it's like, wow, dude, like, when did WoW come out? WoW came out in 2004, right? Private servers existed in 2006. I know because I was on them. So, I've been playing WoW private servers since the dawn of time. And if you're wondering why, it's because I couldn't afford a subscription. The only subscription I could afford, which I would do chores to afford, literally, like, taking care of people's dogs and their lawn and shit, and my uncle helping me on my report card if I did well, was Star Wars Galaxies. So for WoW, I couldn't afford it. So I had to play on private servers. So for me, things like Age of Discovery have always been a concept that, like, private servers have played with, but it never matters as much because it's just not the official content creator that's doing it, like Blizzard. And you might be saying, yeah, but that means that, like, what, Blizzard's the only one that's ever going to be any good at it? No, I'm not trying to say that. I guess I'm trying to be realistic and say that, like, nothing will ever get people excited like Blizzard doing it. You see what I'm saying? Because people are terrified to touch private servers, let alone even look at or think about them. Suddenly, when WoW is doing this Age of Discovery, this concept that private servers have been doing, where it's like progressively allowing you to level and introducing new things and kind of keeping everyone around the same, like, floating points so they don't separate too much in the world, because the world already has flaws. Let's, like, fix the flaws by coming up with our own solutions. I'm actually very excited for Age of Discovery. I'll be playing it, world versus world and raids. I'll be leveling to max probably. It just sounds like the perfect kind of thing that they should have just launched the game with initially, to be honest. But for Blizzard to even launch WoW Classic in the first place was unheard of. For them to do this is just a natural progression. So now you might be saying, wow, isn't this crazy? It kind of is. But in a sense, it is just a natural progression. If you guys want to take it to the next level and make your own Classic Plus server, or just learn how to make a game with training wheels of Classic attached to it, you're going to need to know what players want to play and what they want to experience. And what better way to do that than take all of this data that you can take from doing Age of Discovery? TJ Miller, is that a joke that TJ Miller makes? What's the progress on your single player game project? Are you planning to log, showcase your development progress on Discord? Yes. One thing I'll say is that, like, what I'm really focusing on, and I've been focusing on like the past like month or two, has just been level design, the concept of how in depth I want to make the levels, and fully deciding on which engine I'm going to choose. I ended up choosing RPG Maker, which was like, you know, I was not happy to leave Unity per se, but I was happy in the sense that RPG Maker will make me able to make my game much more effectively and easier. And also, the kind of game that I'm trying to create, I think is possible with RPG Maker. Now, there are some downsides to it, like having to use a turn-based combat system, but it just greatly reduces how much overhead I'm going to need and how much art I'm going to have to pay for. So in terms of, that's what I've been focusing on, is doing levels myself, hand making them, which I enjoy doing, by the way, but I'm taking my time on, and building the actual world. So my guess is that you guys will probably see like a very basic demo of like the very first level, because we're going to be very open, public facing with the development. We're going to have public demos for free. Before we ever sell anything about the game, people are going to know what to expect, have played the game, and have an idea of what it is. And so I don't want to give like hard deadlines, but I would probably say like look at like summer of next year for us to have a playable demo. And that feels really realistic, especially because like the holidays are a really good time for me to make money. So I can use the money that I'm self-funding to pay for the artists, sprites, and different work that I need done, which is not a necessity, which is why I'm not focusing on it first. That's a big change that I made, is I was focusing a lot on art direction and trying to create the right feel. But now I'm just building out the levels and just building out the mechanics in the way that I want to. Because I feel like that's just more important, especially for creating a world. Well, Nubo, they don't always say it the nice way, bro. Operation 7 win? I don't know. What's Operation 7? I'd get more into tab targeting if it had more meaningful by moment decisions, moment by moment decisions, than just this do big DPS. So my argument there would be play Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 1 feels like you're playing a constant game of paper, scissors, rock. You're like, all right, no, okay, all right, okay, all right, okay, heal. And there's some downsides to that, but there's some plus sides to that too. It feels very tactical. Excuse me. MMO FPS were implemented like tap games. The shooting was just faked in the background, was rolling a dice if you got a hit. So if you aimed onto someone, yeah. Well, a lot of the time, unfortunately, no physics engines actually existed in any of those games, and you can tell and feel that. And most FPS players, sadly, probably can. Maybe MMO players can't. Maybe that's the idea. I think why I can't really get into MMO is because I like PvE. But I don't like the static nature of combat. Interesting. Yeah, well, wow, that's interesting. I say interesting because I've always been advocating for players like you, but I've never met you. So hello, nice to meet you. No, I was kidding, but it's funny to like meet the player that I've been advocating for like 20 years. Which is, I've always advocated for the player that gets bored of the same fucking PvE experiences. Because people used to just say that I was a hater. Oh, you don't just like raids. Oh, you don't like PvE. It's like, okay, if you want to just simplify it, okay. But in reality, it's more that like, I was thinking about, what about the player that doesn't want to do the same thing all the fucking time? It's like, well, I met this player. They exist. Number one thing that used to happen on private servers back in the day, if people were wondering, especially in WoW, is we just dueled each other. Not much more than that. think it's important to have a 100% vanilla experience available, certainly, but after 1 year, just release a game where people can play their favorite spec. I think like avant-garde servers should exist, but you just have to be careful with stuff like that. When you're designing a world, it's not as simple as just cloning the world. That can create so many problems. But I agree. I mean, I think we're all in agreement here, Des, me, Rept. If we had more non-static PvE and online RPGs, I would be playing them all the fucking time. That'd be the coolest shit ever to me. It's why I've been crying about roaming mobs for ages, and they still don't exist. Yeah, and Rept, I actually want to design a couple classes whenever I do decide at, 20 million years in the future to go to MMO status, to build playstyles and classes that are going to be for players of all types and styles. And I think that that's another thing lacking in games, is like, you don't just have to make the game appealing by making it easy. You can actually add easy to play characters, right? League does this. Garen is easy to play. Does that mean that Garen never loses? No. MMOs don't have that. They don't have the Garen character, followed by the Talon character, followed by the Aurelian Soul character. You see what I'm saying? Like, there needs to be more variety of classes in that kind of way, where the class itself is the actual difficulty. But oftentimes I think devs don't want to do that because they're scared that if they put their line in the sand and say this class is difficult, they'll get so much pushback because of that, and you will. But the problem is that you're getting pushback most of the time from players that class isn't made for. So it's, it's okay sometimes to ignore certain pushback. Get your questions in, by the way, before I'm about to dip here pretty quickly. The Great Defender had a question: what kind of combat system would you be using for that game? There's a way to make it more like a tactical RPG setup. There is. However, I'm gonna sound controversial, but I don't even know if I like tactical RPGs that much. Maybe, like, don't quote me on this, because I don't want you guys to, like, quote this and then, like, play it back after the first demo comes out and it's got tactical combat. It's either gonna be a tactical RPG or turn-based combat. And that's just because the limitations of the system, to be very blunt with everybody. The MMO is not gonna have, maybe even the second game is not gonna have that kind of combat system. But something that I wanted to rant about is I got one of these, like, comments, and I've been getting a lot of these. Well, first off, the most common comment that I've been getting in the past, like, month has been, oh, I'm surprised this game even launched. Is this even considered a death? It was a stillborn. And, like, at this point, I've realized that, like, many years ago, I realized that, like, I'm just gonna have to accept that I'm gonna get the same comments all the time. But lately, it's been, like, absurd how many times I'm seeing the same fucking comment. Making the same joke. And it's not even done, like, they're not memeing, right? It's not like Video Game Donkey and they're making a meme. No, they're making different variants of the same joke. And it's like, bro, can we not make that joke, please? It's not even funny. It also doesn't even make any fucking sense, because it's not a living organism. So, like, anyway, one of my rants out of the way, or one of my other rants out of the way. My final rant, and I mean that, get your questions in now, I'm about to leave in like a minute or two, is concerning, I saw this post and this person was saying, I recently got into your Death of a Game series, and then, like, I saw how you engage with your audience, and it made me feel like you should, like, learn from your ways, or I don't know, this is something along the lines of that. And what it got me thinking about was a common theme I've seen in their posts and a couple other posts is that when I'm speaking with my audience, sometimes this is a problem with actually engaging with your audience. This sounds really stupid, but hear me out. They think that we're actually on equal terms. We're not on equal terms. Let me break this down for you, because this is what I love to do, and this is when I love being an asshole. I've put out 70 plus videos on failing games and companies. In each of those videos, at least 3,000 plus words are written on them. In over half of those videos, I got developer testimonies. So you throw in the fact that I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, it's like, okay, you giving me your opinion about something isn't the same, actually. Because I'm doing mine based on the basis of the series, based on whatever logical arguments I'm presenting, right? But also based on me. That's the part that people miss. I'm also an expert. I'm also a source. I'm also part of the process. And sometimes when it comes out, it makes me laugh because sometimes people notice it and they're like, oh, whoa, what the heck? Suddenly Nerd has his opinion about this game? It's like, bro, it's my fucking channel. And I designed this series to be about a detective discovering this shit. That detective doesn't have to be a robot. Nothing about detectives have ever said that they don't have opinions. So where are you getting this from? That I would just somehow like read the timeline and the clues and tell the case story without having opinions about it? What the fuck? Like what detective story have you ever seen that's like that? They don't exist. Because detectives are actually incredibly opinionated. All of them are. In fact, very problematically so. Like the top 3, 4 most famous detectives, problematic personalities. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, even if I'm telling them that the character is the detective and I'm detectiving, even that is not enough to make them realize, oh, okay. And then he's also a human being. And he also has opinions. But he's doing it under the guise of the character in the series. Yes, that is what I'm doing. But what I'm not doing is the same thing you're doing in a post, which is that you're posting without any history, without any videos, without any long-standing history of talking to developers and studying with them and doing consulting work with them and testing all the major AAA MMOs and so on and so forth. You don't have that history. So that means that, like, when people have lately, I've seen this done a few times, that people think that this is me being mean in the comments, but they'll say that, oh, it's because you start to discredit people's opinions. It's like, okay, let me make this clear. If we're talking about what's actually factually, like, true and correct, I don't give a fuck about your opinion, bro. I'll tell you that to your face. I genuinely don't give a fuck about your opinion. Like when someone says, yeah, but developers don't care about if their game is massive or not, it's like, maybe your perception of it, but I'm telling you as a developer, as someone who's worked with developers, they do care. They have to. They don't have a choice. Like, what the fuck is this stupid shit I have to listen to? And like, that's where the arrogant part comes out. And by the way, I compete on Saturday, so you guys are going to get the maximum arrogant nerd this week, which is like, people think that that's the part that we're equal on. It's like, no, we're not actually equal on, even if we played the same game for the same amount of hours. The dead body was mangled. I have no opinion on this. Followed by, I have no strong... What's your opinion, detective? I got no strong feelings one way or another. You guys are killing me, dude. But it's so funny because this doesn't exist. Like, what's your favorite detective series? Go to your favorite scene. And Lucifer, no, not Lucifer is a good series, but not detective. Luther. Go watch Luther. And it's the best scene whenever he goes, you know what? I actually don't care. When he's like genuinely apathetic, like as much as Sherlock likes to be that way sometimes, imagine if that was actually his show and character. Watson comes to him, Sherlock, we have a new case. It's something really interesting. And Sherlock's just like, honestly, bro, I don't give a fuck. He's saying what? It doesn't make any... It's not interesting. The story doesn't work if the detective doesn't care. So that always cracks me up. And maybe it comes from the fact that people think, well, people go to Sherlock with cases, so he's a third party. Yeah, but he still has opinions. That's the whole fucking series, is him giving you his opinions. Oh man, you guys kill me. Today from your favorite series with Mr. Detective, the Robot Detective. I thought you'd be a completely rational person. You must only use facts and logic. True. But yeah, you guys, that's kind of where my rant is going, is just like, And then it also goes into like, for the people being like, bro, why do you think that like other people's opinions don't matter in the same way that yours does? Because they actually don't, right? Like if we're talking about my favorite game is, and I come in and I'm like, your favorite game is my favorite game. It's like, relax. That makes no fucking sense and that's creepy. Here's what's actually happening. Oh yeah, so the Japanese market works like this. Bro, that's just your opinion. It's like, it's not my opinion. Like, why am I getting Chinese, Korean, and Japanese fans sending me messages, including someone just sent me fucking like $20 telling me, yo bro, I'm Chinese American, thanks for highlighting Solo and Chinese culture. It's like, I don't need their money to say that like that it matters, but the point that I'm making here is that like it matters to some people, right? To these audiences that I might cover more adjacently, and more of my audience is Western, for example. But there is still players that do care about that stuff. They do still care about, well, Westerners keep calling my type of market this kind of market, and they're not understanding it. And I've heard this from Japanese, from Korean, from Chinese players. In fact, the first person that had ever told me about the whole Solo story was a random Chinese fan. Hit me up and said, yo, bro, there's some crazy shit going down. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, everyone keeps calling Solo pay to win. He's like, I live in China. It's not pay to win, and it's been out for 2-3 years. And I was like, oh, and what? Seriously? Yeah, look it up. I looked it up. He was telling the truth, guys. You know how many hate messages I got from people when I streamed the game saying, oh, it's pay to win. Oh, it's fucking Chinese shit. Oh, it's like Korean pay to win. That's the other thing people kept saying, Korean pay to win. I'm like, but it's a Chinese game. Yeah, but Korean pay to win. Okay, let me say this again, just so you understand. It's a Chinese game. Yeah, but Korean pay to win. It's like, alrighty. I guess we can't have a rational discussion. And like when I'm talking about Final Fantasy XIV, it's like the Japanese game that's Western. That's why it's weird if people are always wondering, what about Final Fantasy XIV? It's a Japanese game that was made for Westerners, right? That's very unique. But is that reflective of the market? Think about that for a second. Is that reflective of the Japanese market? No. What the fuck? Why would that be reflective of the Japanese market? They're not a Western market. They're Eastern. So their games are Eastern games. They're not Western games, which is why Final Fantasy XIV is so unique. It's a Western game, right? But it's made in Japan, right? That's unique. Because WoW appealed to Eastern fans being a Western game, but it wasn't made to appeal to Eastern. Well, I mean, they localized it, I guess, if you want to count that, but not really. Maybe you could argue with Mists of Pandaria, right? Maybe. But, yeah, maybe with Mists of Pandaria, you could argue that that was marketed towards China or areas of Asia. But you get what I'm saying, right? So, that was just something that I saw, and it was like, I had just finished like my training, and I got home and I read this comment, and the comment was like this person having this like passionate response to me, wondering why I'm like not viewing other people's opinions as equal as mine on certain like subjects that I'm qualified on. It's like, guys, because like just like when I worked in construction management, specifically in fire stopping and fire safety, if you came to me and started saying stupid shit about fire safety, including being like, oh well, actually the World Trade Center collapsed and it had good fire safety, I'd be like, fucking stupid. You don't know what I've looked at the plans. You don't know what you're talking about, right? But since online gaming is very new, right? And content creators right now are largely the experts. That's just true. Because so many developers don't even make the games anymore, or don't make that many of them. I think there's a bit of like confusion about that. And I'm not just saying myself, to be clear. I'm talking about other content creators, and I'm not even trying to pick specific names, but I'm saying like other content creators in the online RPG and MMO space, like Josh Dive Hayes, and you know, what's that other one? There's a new one that just came out. He does kind of more like reportive, like, you know, investigative journalism type stuff. Kiko? Anyway, there's Impressions with Lazy Peon. You get the point that I'm making is like, if you actually go to a lot of these current content creators, there's not that many of them in the online RPG space or MMO space, the chances of them knowing more than the developers that are making these games, or knowing more than the games or people that you're playing the games with, is incredibly high. Like, John, I'm not going to say their stats, but these guys have been playing this shit forever, and they have a long history of analyzing it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is they deserve to be treated like experts, okay? Like, don't even make this about me, but like, those guys deserve to be treated like experts. Not all of them are paid or treated like experts, but this is something that I've started to feel more passionate about lately, because it's like, well, I'm getting comments from people that are saying, well, in your opinion, this is what this means, and it's like, I have some arguments that are like that, but in reality, most of my arguments are actually arguing from the place of like historical precedence, which just means that I know more than you do. And I'm telling you, hey, this thing existed before, and you don't know that. And suddenly, instead of just believing me or going and looking it up for yourself, you feel the need to push back against that. Think about that for a second. That's why it's helpful to have people like me, because I don't give a fuck if someone liked the game or likes a certain other game or not. I'm still going to tell the story how it's supposed to be told, which is that I think it's relevant in history for these reasons. So anyway, that's pretty much my rant. It was just that when people are experts, guys, don't feel the need to challenge them like they're not an expert, right? Like, why? Like, think about that for a second. If this person's calling themselves an expert, and your best argument, for example, is a single sentence or a single paragraph, probably not enough to really do much to an expert. And if you're wondering, well then, if this person's not an expert, how can I find the experts? I mean, good luck. But one thing you'll find is that eventually you will encounter an expert, and they know a lot more than you do. And that's an opportunity to actually learn, right? And that's what I said to this comment, by the way. The comment, my response to this comment was basically like, look, this is an opportunity for you to learn. Meaning that you could have came into this discussion, seen the video, and engaged with me in a way to try to learn and understand more. Instead, you came in to tell me how things are, while probably playing one game your entire life that's online for 3 years, starting in 2020, and never being an alpha tester, closed beta tester, any paid tester, never doing any consultancy work, and not having a 20+ long year career in this shit. It's like, on the basis, bro, I'm just gonna discard your opinion. I'm just gonna level with you, brother. Because you don't have any of that. So it's like, if you want to argue like we're on the same point, then all I'm gonna do is just be like, bro, no. We're not. Yes, yeah, I mean, John Rowe, literally, I've gotten comments like that. Like, I get them probably every now and then, but in the past like 2 months, I've gotten like 4 of them like that, where they're both very sensitive, which, to explain to people in academia, in very intellectual circles, and I'm talking, I've been invited to Mensa, I've been to top universities, University of Texas, right? So on and so forth. I've been a part of, I told you, INTJ Forum, probably some of the highest IQ people I've ever encountered there. And you know what I found when I was there? I found that these people were experts in whatever their particular fields and interests were, right? Incredibly educated, so smart, da-da-da-da-da. But just like any of us can be, just like I can tell you 20 things I'm stupid at, they weren't experts at everything. Because that's not how smart people work. And the other point that I wanted to make, which is why I always laugh when people get so sensitive about it, is that in any of these circles, nobody complains about being nice. Nobody complains about being nice. All my people on the spectrum right now are probably laughing with me. We're all collectively laughing because we think about this, bro. Like, guys, think about that for a second. Like, you think that the smart people and the people who really want to engage in these ideas and about these subjects that nobody gives a fuck about care about being nice? And that's why I'm glad that I give some effort to be a polite person and be kind and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to say I don't pay attention to that stuff, but this shit just makes me laugh. I have so many intellectual friends and super smart people who are doing things that in major positions in government and special forces and you name it. They are not nice when it comes to their subjects that they're experts in at all. Because they don't have to be. They're qualified, right? There's no need for them to be nice if people are being idiotic about whatever their, profession or passion is. But yeah, it's just something that always cracks me up when I get those messages where it's people wanting me to be sad about how I care about my job or that I actually want to engage with the idea, so I'm trying to make them be like, hey, can you make a better argument? It's like, I can't believe people miss that part. Shows the Japanese, Korean, and Chinese game to a Western player. Tell me the difference. It's the same picture. I was actually on the same subject, Des. Like, literally the same subject. I'm just, as seemingly, as much as it bothers you, I'm a long-winded person when it comes to talking about subjects that I like. Yeah, that was my subject. The same subject that I was talking about, which is that an expert is not somebody that likes the same thing as you. An expert's not somebody who knows a little bit more than you. An expert who's somebody who has an entire career dedicated and obsessed with a particular field or given study. Which means that if your response to them is ever, yeah, but aren't you being mean? They're never, and I'm telling you from personal experience, gonna care. I don't care. If you think me exercising my expertise is being mean, go fuck yourself. Like, seriously. Like, use it as an opportunity to learn, and let's talk with each other. Let's talk about our preferences. We can get to know each other. We can be friends. But don't talk to me like you're also the expert, like we're on the same fucking plane. It's just like, and this is a problem in any field. I'm not trying to make it about YouTube. I'm trying to make it about whatever you're in. You will encounter people like this. Trust me. When I was in construction, I also encountered people like this, right? Where they don't know anything about fire stuff, but they're trying to tell me how stuff works. Oh, well, we thought that we could put it through the wall and we just, it's like, no, you thought wrong. But anyway, on that note, Des is right. That is the end. And I am ending the stream. So, because I'm pretty tired, I'm going to be resting a lot because I have a big tournament on Saturday. And plus, I'm just a tired boy as always. Big brain, tired boy. Anyway, nice talking to everybody. Nice seeing everybody electronically. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. What am I missing? The next Death of a Game is on Earthrise, which is a very interesting project that not a lot of people know about. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think I have any other big announcements yet that I feel comfortable announcing, and any other new videos besides the one that I just mentioned. Yeah, so I will rest well. Thank you. I appreciate that, guys, and have a good rest of your week. As I said, good rest of your day, and I'm out. Peace. Hit the music.